Okay, we are live streaming. I'm going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to remind council and municipal staff that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. All council meetings are also recorded. Recordings will be available to the public on the township's YouTube account. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is restricted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is held electronically under Bylaw 2020-170 to amend Procedural Bylaw 2018-117 pursuant to Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended. The purpose of the meeting, the Council for the Township of Madawaska Valley deemed it advisable to hold a special council meeting as allowable under Section 3.6.4 of the Procedural Bylaw 2018-117. I'd like to start with our First Nations land acknowledgement. As we gather today, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We'll move to the adoption of the agenda for Thursday, January 27th, 2022. The recommendation is that the special council meeting agenda for Thursday, January 27th, 2022 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. All those in favor? And that's carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest?
None.
Okay,
None here.
I see none. Thank you. Next, we have delegations and presentations. We're really excited to have Michael Wildman and David Reed of Municipal Government Wayfinders Limited, and they are here to present our operational service delivery review. Welcome, Michael and David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having us here. I might ask Gwen if we could have hosting privileges so that we can put our presentation up on the screen.
Okay.
While you wait for that, Michael, I just want to remind council and some of the staff that are present, if you see intermittent internet, because we have quite a few on today, during the presentation, you can just maybe turn off your camera, and that might assist as well.
Okay, Gwen has texted me that you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, let's give that a try then. Bear with me 1 second. And how is that?
Fantastic. It's working. Now, just before they start, I just want to let council and staff know that they're going to do their presentation, which I was informed is about 40 minutes. And then we will do question and answer session afterwards. So everyone hold on to your questions and please take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. We're very pleased to be here to be speaking with you about the operational service delivery review. We've been working with your staff for about 4 months and yourselves as well as some of your key stakeholders. Today, David and I will make as you mentioned, a 40-minute or so presentation. We'll be alternating between some of the slides, and we welcome any of your questions at the end. At the bottom of this first slide, Madam Mayor, there's a description of wayfinding, and it's somewhat relevant to really the purpose of the operational service delivery review, and is to really ascertain the position of the township and plan and follow a route to take you to wherever it is council and staff feel is most appropriate to go to. So with respect to data collection and analysis, in Q4 of 2021, our firm was retained to complete the service delivery review. And our approach is very much an evidence-based approach, and evidence is what informs our recommendations. So in order to build that background of information that we need, we review plans and reports, policies, bylaws, and census data, and a whole host of other pertinent information that I know that Council has seen inside of the more comprehensive report. We conducted interviews with Council, the CAO, department heads, staff, as well as others. And we did post a high-level online survey for about a month to gauge public sentiment. In October, 2 of our team members we visited the town, and we were ensuring that we were practicing COVID-19 safety practices during that visit. While visiting, our team did tour several of the facilities, the vast majority of them, and the municipality in general, to really get a sense of the environment. There were several follow-up interviews and inquiries that we conducted with staff, council, and others. And we also interviewed or sought clarifications from your IT consultant, your GIS consultant, the environmental landfill consultant, your asset management consultant, as well as local stakeholders. So it's this comprehensive document and review, the interviews, the online survey, and the physical ground truthing that have all helped to inform our recommendation. In other words, this is the evidence that we relied upon. When we think about the township, we look back at first to the 2016 census, which shows a population of 4123. And the OMPF data from 2021 shows a total of 2,619 households. There are 913 seasonal homes according to Stats Canada. And this will come up a little later in our discussion when we talk about the Muskoka Effect, which we heard a fair amount about with everyone we interviewed. So the township is a mix of urban and rural lands, and we found it to have many service offerings, so very competitive as a township. And we do see, and you know this, that there's an abundance of tourism and seasonal outdoor opportunities. And again, that links back a little bit as well to the Muskoka Effect that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Municipal water and sanitary sewers are provided in Barry's Bay. And there's reportedly ample capacity to accommodate growth, though we note there is no master plan in place to sort of guide how that growth occurs. The township provides curbside waste and recycling collection for about 700 users in Barry's Bay, and this is based on a full cost recovery fee for those users. The township operates transfer stations for other areas who do not pay for or receive curbside collection. The township operates a landfill site reportedly at about 45 years of remaining life expectancy. However, this estimate is based on limited information, and we will get into some discussion about some changes in that information as we move through the presentation. So as I was alluding to, the recent concerns were communicated in January of this year through aerial topographic survey that the life expectancy is considerably less at 11 years. And that really says that you got about 25%, a little less than 25% of remaining capacity. That is a very big delta from what was thought to be the life expectancy. So we'll be speaking about that. There's not much of it in our report, Council, mainly because this information just came out about a week or two ago. If that estimate is correct, this does present some concerns. Intermunicipal agreements do exist, as they do in most municipalities. You have them for boundary road maintenance as well as 5 services, and these are very common agreements that we find. So David's going to walk you through the financial realities.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Council. Some of the financial realities I just speak to briefly. The Council has adopted asset management policies, plans, and procedures to assist in responding to the widening infrastructure gap. We find these policies and plans are in reasonably good shape. We did note, however, some gaps and other concerns regarding asset management, which we will speak to further in the report. Some interviewees felt that road rehabilitation was going well, but others' assets may be falling behind. The arena is an example. Township offices, the water and wastewater system that is nearing 50 years of age were all raised as examples. We concur with these assets, and they should figure prominently in the upcoming life cycle strategies of the municipality. Also of note was the roads preservative management programs. In your road need study, we feel that this program may be lagging a little bit in what the recommendations were. The CAO has recently commissioned building condition assessments. This is laudable. These proactive assessments are essential for just-in-time financial investment into asset life cycling strategies. Additional asset condition assessment programs, including such things as rolling cammering of the sewers, flow monitoring, pavement conditions, etc., should be added. Currently, there is no long-range capital forecast to provide linkages from the asset management plan to financial and budget strategies, so that life cycling requirements occur on a just-in-time basis. We understand, however, that the Treasurer plans to develop a long-range capital forecast in 2022, that's this year, and we recommend that this occur as soon as possible and that it be updated annually to support the municipality's financial strategies. The township has commenced work on a development charges background study and bylaw pursuant to the Development Charges Act. Development charges help ensure that local taxpayers are not paying for services needed to support new development. In other words, that growth will pay for growth. To avoid lost opportunities to collect these funds needed to support development and to protect local ratepayers from having to carry the burden of costs attributed to new development, the DC project should be completed as soon as possible. Madawaska Valley's taxes are competitive and slightly lower than the average tax levels of comparative municipalities, which should suggest that there is some room to utilize taxation as a funding source for new or enhanced services and facilities. However, note our interviews and the online survey indicate a divide on this topic. Therefore, we should look at alternate sources to be explored before considering significant tax increases. As an example, a review of user fees has potential to increase revenue by approximately $60,000, and this could be done without impacting taxes. There's good news, except for the high tax receivables, Madawaska Valley's financial indicators are in very good shape. Reserve levels are reasonable, although with recent news about the landfill site life expectancy, closures, costs, and timing will need to be reviewed with some urgency. We do believe that capital reserve envelopes are complex and could be improved upon. The township's tangible capital asset additions exceed the conditional grants by almost $750,000 annually. The township's TCA additions exceed TCA amortization by almost $870,000 a year annually. And the reserve and debt repayment has improved by over $4 million over the past 10 years. These are all really strong indicators and point to the fact that the asset management is in fairly reasonable shape. The financial officers of Ontario have financial indicators, and we looked at these as well. All financial risks are in the low category, except for the total taxes receivable as a percentage of total taxes levied, which is high.
Okay, thank you, David. We're going to talk a little bit about the Muskoka Effect. We did hear a fair amount about that. So it has been described in almost as a benefit and a challenge. With the rising property values in Muskoka, putting this upward pressure on property values, it is now putting a similar upward pressure on Madawaska's property values as cottagers and other seasonal users push into the township. There's also the work from home trends, largely driven by COVID-19, but not exclusively, where more homeowners are moving out of the big cities and working from home in the smaller venues, such as Madawaska Valley. And it's clear that this has resulted in growth management pressures on township resources. Many of the new residents we heard that come from larger jurisdictions do expect enhanced service levels more akin to a large municipal tax base. But it's important, the differences in total assessment and other factors are really important considerations when we discuss service delivery expectations. We're going to talk about that a bit. Muskoka Lake's number of households is more than 3 times that of Madawaska Valley. When we look at Muskoka Lake's weighted assessment at $1 million, that is 4 times more than Madawaska Valley's at about $250,000. Median household income in Madawaska or Muskoka Lakes is nearly $20,000 more than Madawaska Valley. So the evidence suggests that Muskoka Lakes, as with other larger municipalities, do have a great deal more taxation revenue to help offer more enhanced services than Madawaska Valley or similar comparators would. Local demographics also play a key role in the ability to pay for the enhanced services through taxation. With this as a backdrop, we do find that Madawaska Valley offers good value to its ratepayers. Newcomers to Madawaska Valley with higher expectations should be provided with some of these facts to help them better appreciate the good value for taxes paid and collected available to the residents of Madawaska Valley. And we can reference table 1. It's also included on page 14 or appendix 6 of our report, which really does sort of in tabular form show how this all shakes out. So operational service delivery review, what is it? It examines many of the aspects of municipal operations. It is not just about cutting costs, although there are always opportunities to do so. In the context of this report, the SDR includes discussions related to services or processes and how they are delivered, effectiveness and efficiencies related to municipal practices, policies, and operations, general statutory and regulatory compliance, risk identification and risk management, potential for cost savings and or estimated cost to fund service delivery enhancements, comparison of local practices to best practices, comparative analysis where applicable. There's a fair amount of that in our report, and recommendations towards opportunities for improvement. And really that's the way we view them. They're opportunities to improve or enhance the way you're doing things. They're not necessarily an indicator that you're doing anything wrong. And on that topic, although we take a critical analysis approach, which is a defined term, the feedback that we provide should not be construed in any way as a criticism of past staff performance or council decisions. It's not to be viewed that way. In fact, it's the contrary. Our feedback should be viewed as best practice and professional advice in the form of opportunities for improvement. Although we do discuss financial topics, it's important to note that an SDR is not an accounting, financial, or forensic audit. So when it comes to our observations, we found that council is supportive of this review and really does want the township to deliver service excellence. Feedback during interviews was very similar and at times nearly identical. The township has experienced pressures from the Muskoka Effect and increased work from home practices. And the township has responded by adding an experienced building code official, and this does appear to be helping. We note that the large geographic size of the township does present some challenges due to travel time needed to complete timely building permit inspections. While we don't feel you're at a tipping point yet, we do feel it's getting close and it should be monitored closely. With everything that's going on with the economy these days, with the announcement from the Bank of Canada yesterday not to move to an increase in rate, we really feel that there's a lot of volatility out there. So the pace of development may also be affected, but it should be monitored. We found the planner to be very experienced and skilled, and beyond that of what we would see in a typical planner. In fact, he is quite skilled in areas outside of that realm. And these are duties that really we would typically see in the clerk realm and really unrelated to planning. And it's our view that these extra duties that he's doing, and that he's doing them well, are competing with critical planning duties, and as such, they are causing delays in the planning approvals process. This is not a fault of the planner. This is just a process issue that we think can be adjusted. So we do feel that the duties should be allocated to the deputy clerk immediately. These, as I said earlier, really fall right into the realm of clerk duties. You have an experienced deputy clerk there. We don't see any issues with transitioning in that direction. There are also a number of key personnel that can retire now or very soon, and succession strategies should be implemented with urgency to mitigate against interruptions in business continuity and ensure critical corporate memory is transferred. This is where a lot of employers, not just municipalities, do get caught, is in turnover, and it can affect business continuity fairly significantly. We go into a lot of public works garages, council, and we've seen it all. We found your public works garages to be exceptionally well organized, and we found that the superintendent was very knowledgeable. Any discussion we had with him, he was very engaged in that discussion and was able to respond very quickly. The majority of roads we toured were in good shape overall. Transfer stations were also organized and tidy. We found that the contracted water and wastewater operators are well credentialed, and certainly the senior operator is quite knowledgeable as well. Attendance at fire calls and training was reportedly achieved at better than typical levels when considering the membership is essentially made up of volunteers. The treasurer we found to be very aware of budget financial pressures as well as the local challenges. And your CAO we found to be very knowledgeable, very experienced. So based on our findings, we have assessed that the township is in good overall shape. And we don't make a comment like this lightly, Madam Mayor and Council. It's not very often that we go to the point where we actually make this statement. We have made it for Madawaska Valley. You should be commended for being where you are. And we think now you have some opportunity to sort of take it to the next level. So I'm going to go over the online survey highlights. We did post it, as I said, for a month, and the full analytics is available in Appendix A of the report. 60% of the respondents indicated that they agreed it is easy to access town staff, while 14 strongly agreed. So these are favorable responses. More people go to the township website a little or not at all when looking for information than those who do go a great deal or a lot. So this suggests to us that this is an area where we can improve upon, bringing awareness to the website as a primary information tool and a service delivery tool, as well as a future tool for expanded customer service offerings. And this is, as we said in our report, has a lot to do with COVID-19, work from home, and other sort of work-life balance things. Slightly over 40% of respondents found it difficult or have not used the website recently. This too suggests some room for improvement and aligns with the findings of the frequency of website use. 60.5% of respondents were not aware that they could submit comments or complaints about the township's website, or through the township's website, I should say. And this we find is probably due to difficulty finding the form on the website, as it is not located on the landing page. And we find more often than not, the ones that get used the most are the ones that are right there front and center when you log into the website. A very high percentage of respondents, 73.5%, say they will likely use the township's website if it offered more user options, such as a portal for viewing accounts, paying bills, submitting service requests, or applying for permits or licenses. So that's a very high number. When asked if the township communicates enough information to residents and businesses about their activities, we found that there was about a one-third split. So there is some room, we believe, to improve upon there. When asked if respondents were aware that they can view council meetings online, 43.2% indicated they were not aware. So you're getting close to 50%. So there may be some opportunity there to promote that. 14.5% of respondents rated the conditions of roads as above average, and over 64.3% rated them as average. So that's a very good level of satisfaction. The quality of winter plowing operations was rated favorably as well, with close to 30% as above average and another 54% rating as average. So those are very good ratings as well. Investment towards infrastructure rehabilitation projects, such as roads, parks, facilities, and a separate item, strengthening the local economy through attracting new businesses and new homes, both ranked as the highest of priorities within the next 5 years of the options that were provided. And they ranked closely, as you can see there, with a 3.89 and a 3.64 respectively. When asked to describe the level of satisfaction with township services, 7.5% were very satisfied, 48.6% were satisfied, 24.8% were neither satisfied or dissatisfied, so neutral, 13.5% were dissatisfied, 5.4% were very dissatisfied. Those are lower levels of dissatisfaction, so they should be viewed as positive. Obviously, there's always opportunity to work on improving that. When asked if they would support a moderate increase in taxes or user fees above the rate of inflation, if it resulted in noticeable improvements to municipal services such as improved roads, parks, fire services, enhanced waste collection or recycling opportunities. The responses were close, with 44.8% responding yes and 55.1% responding no. And in our experience, every single time we ask that question, we are sitting in that range. You rarely see something like 90% one and 10% the other. They usually land, very close to that 50% mark. So this is not a scientific survey, but the results do provide some valuable insight in informing our recommendations for the opportunities for improvement. And they will also assist council in prioritizing options today and into the future. So it's helpful to have this as some added information to support where you're going. So turning back over to David.
Okay, I'm going to speak briefly to some of the opportunities for improvement. Most of our 66 recommended opportunities for improvement are best practice based to help improve service delivery, save costs, increase revenue, and or mitigate risks. Now, on the surface, 66 recommendations might seem like a lot. Typically, our recommendations are more than that. And to put a perspective on that, we look at approximately 270 topics when we do these reviews. So 66 recommendations represents less than 25% of the topics reviewed. So that is very, very good. Some of these recommended opportunities for improvements include, but are not limited to, priority setting through expanded master plans and annual department work plans, development and implementation of long-range financial plans and strategies, fees collected, landfill, water, wastewater, planning, buildings, etc. Asset management, the township offices, buildings, road preservative management, water and wastewater as examples. Accelerated approval of the annual budget, regular senior management team meetings, financial policy adjustments, procedural changes to streamline council and committee meetings, a succession plan to mitigate the impacts of temporary and permanent vacancies, feasibility review for cost-effective modernization of facilities and potential consolidation. If implemented, our recommendations should help increase efficiencies, improve client experiences, enhance service delivery, mitigate risks, save money, and or protect the long-term interest of the township and its ratepayers. Many recommendations, 43 of total, come with very little or no new costs. Others come with cost and may be more complex to implement. And it will be important to recognize that not everything can be done at the same time. Action should be prioritized with the highest yield items rising to the top of the list. And some of the categories of recommendations are as follows. In administration, we looked at general, clerks, finance, and technology, asset management, council, economic development, fire, health and safety, human resources, public works, recreation, risk management, and strategic master and long-range planning.
Okay, back to me. So topics have been given a code in your report, Council, and a title, and that's for ease of reference. And they include a commentary regarding the issue, concern, or risk, the recommendation or options, the benefits, and the estimated possible costs. Opportunities for improvement, also known as recommendations, have been itemized in a matrix, which can be found in Appendix 2 of the report for quick reference. So those titles and coding that I mentioned earlier are also in that matrix. We have suggested priority ranking, and our ranking goes from important to critical as suggested. If it's not at least important, it shouldn't be in our report. We also provide a recommended implementation timeframe, and that is suggested for council consideration. So we have said when we think these should occur. Of course, council may have other priorities and may view things different than us, and that's just fine. We give that as guidance to council and staff, and then we would see that council and staff would potentially refine those timelines. So this is kind of where a lot of people focus discussion. So the estimated range of possible costs are as follows. If you were to do everything we have recommended for the first year, we would expect to see about $51,500 in costs. The next sort of period of time we look at is sort of the 2, 3, and 4 year window, which in total is about 280,000. But if you average it out, it's about 93,266 per year. Then we have another category, which we call sort of the future priorities. Maybe longer range items may require a bit more study before you can get to where you need to go, or a bit more savings. Or you may be wanting to wait to see if you can acquire grants for. And we see about $80,000 worth of those particular ones. So if absolutely everything in our list of the first 4 bullets came true, we would expect to see about $95,000 in total additional annual costs. That includes even those longer term horizon items. So that would be, over time. It would not be in the first year. Many of these costs should be offset by anticipated cost benefits and savings. So where we know what the potential savings, revenues, or equivalent efficiencies, they are estimated, and we have estimated those to an annual amount of $183,744 per year, plus an additional $600,000 in one-time funds. So you can see that there's offsetting savings, revenues, or efficiencies to the costs that are included in the list. Now, there are always other opportunities for offsetting savings and revenues that are a little difficult to estimate because they do depend on such things as council decisions, timing, or even scope before they can be quantified. So where those are unclear, we note that with a TBD in Appendix 2. There aren't a lot of them, but we flag that for you. That just means that there's a bit more decision making needed before you can refine those numbers. So staff time and unknown future costs are not included. And when we show costs, we show the higher range of costs. Like when we discuss these, we might find that a study might cost between $50,000 and $70,000, or a project maybe between $25,000 and $40,000. We put the higher number in just to be cautious and conservative. So it's possible that those numbers could be less. And we feel with a strong commitment by council and staff that there should be no problem successfully implementing our recommendations. We feel they're very achievable. We do recommend that the management team be directed to develop a list of recommendations for council consideration to be implemented on an annual basis. And ideally, it makes sense that this should occur as part of the budget process to ensure that if funding is required, they can be made available at that time. We believe that management should be required to report semi-annually on progress, status reports to council until the recommendations have all been completed. We believe it's appropriate to have KPIs so that annual reviews for management should include implementation of service delivery recommendations as key deliverables because they're very measurable. So in a minute, we're going to talk about how Madawaska Valley compares. We don't have every table from our report in here. We have some that we hope provides council with some comfort that we went into some pretty good detail. There are other tables that are included in our main report that are not included here. And there are other tables that we go through as part of our review before we decide whether they should be included in the report or not. If we don't see red flags, then they just become part of the research we do. And if they do become part of a red flag or an opportunity, then we include them in the report. So with that, David's going to walk you through some of the information that helps inform our report.
Okay, thank you, Michael. First thing we do is we try to come up with some comparator municipalities, and this is based on demographics. It's based on the services that are provided. We try to find a good number of comparators that match up well with Madawaska Valley, and we do this in advance of looking at the data. We want to make sure that we're not looking for municipalities that support a recommendation. We're either looking the opposite, where we're trying to look at the data to support to determine where we're going to do more due diligence in terms of our research. So we found we have a good set of comparators. We feel they match up quite well to Madawaska Valley in terms of demographics and services, and so that's where we start. On to the next slide. We do look at the OMPF. There was no red flags there. It's very much in line with the other municipalities. And then we do a more detailed look into the FIRs. In this case, we did the 2019 FIRs. 2020s were becoming available, but we felt the impacts of COVID might skew those data points. So we used the 2019 data. And a couple things that we do look at, we always see the taxes per household. We did an analysis of that. You can see Madawaska Valley is less than the comparators. We look at the revenue. Revenue is less, so there is potential opportunity there. Expenses as well are very much in line with the admissible comparators. Next slide there, Michael. Then we also look at some observations in terms of the differences between the reserves and long-term debt. Madawaska Valley, very healthy there, over $6 million. The reserves are in excess of the long-term debt. We look at the accumulative surplus, less the TCA net book value. Again, that's around $6 million. That's an indication that asset management is in reasonably good shape. And one of the things we do look at is the ratio of the net book value of the assets plus the reserves, less the long-term debt, less the unfunded liability. And we look at that ratio to the total TCA cost. And we feel that 65% is a very good ratio, and Madawaska Valley is at 65.6%. So in pretty good shape when we look at that ratio. Next slide. Unfunded liabilities. When we look at this, actually, in terms of legislation, you're actually overfunding on the landfill. But with a big caveat, the recent news with the life expectancy of the landfill, that's going to change this drastically. So this needs to be looked at in further detail with some urgency. Prior to that news, you were in good shape, but that's, as I said, that's going to change with the news about the landfill. We looked at winter control costs, doing an excellent job in winter control. $7.53 per lane kilometer versus the snow accumulation. So that is in very good shape. And by all indicators, people are quite happy with the snow removal. So doing a great job there. The user fees, this is one area that we have identified, and we feel that the user fees are probably lower than where they should be. They're certainly lower in terms of where they are in relation to the comparators. And a sort of a glowing example of that is the landfill fees, significantly under where the comparators are. Normally, as an example, construction waste is usually charged at a premium, and Madawaska Valley is at a reduced rate. So this is something we feel may be contributing to the landfill life expectancy issue. So it's something that should be looked at, as well as some of the other user fees as well. Planning is, as an example, are a little bit less than the comparators. Also of note is the water and wastewater rates. We have a recommendation in the report. Your water wastewater rates are a little bit higher, and there may be good reasons for that, but we feel that that should be reviewed and look at any opportunities that there may be to possibly reducing those rates. DC charges is a good example that would address some of that issue. So as you can see, DC charges, Madawaska Valley are currently at 0. And I understand you're looking at that, and there's a few municipalities that have them in the comparators, and there's some that don't. So something that should be investigated further and acted upon. Next slide.
Just as a comment on those slides, anything that's underfunded on in a user fee is made up some other way, and what be that taxation or some other way. So we do feel that the principle of users should pay for what they are using is a good one, and it's a sound one, and it helps to keep taxation a little more manageable. All right, come back on this one. Yes, excuse me. So we have 3 priority topics. There are many topics in the report, but we think these ones rise a little higher than the other ones. So while all opportunities for improvement are considered important, these 3 topics we think should be sort of at the forefront of your thought process going into this. These are asset management, fees collected, and we broached that just a minute ago, and procedural efficiencies. So when we think about priority topics, asset management, the municipal offices and facilities. So this is a quote from AMO. I know that council and staff have probably seen this dozens of times, but it is one that is, it's, even though it's a little dated, it still hits pretty hard. It demonstrates that the infrastructure gap is into the billions, and that the majority of that infrastructure is owned by the municipalities. So that really shows how somewhat off base it is for when you look at orders of government. So we believe the township has taken good steps to help respond to the infrastructure gap, and this includes the asset management plan policies, the building condition assessment, and the road needs study. We have noted, and it was fairly apparent in our visit, that the township has outgrown the municipal office. Some of the concerns, the council chambers are undersized. I don't think I've seen one with a kitchen right in it. Some offices are oversized, which is not helpful either. Office and floor layouts are generally ineffective. There's a lack of effective meeting spaces for staff or the public. The HVAC was insufficient in a number of areas. There's some environmental concerns. There's some accessibility deficiencies. And the IT server room is not properly ventilated. And finally, there's limited space for your paper records. So that's a pretty long list of things that should be looked into. So we know cheaper upfront costs can often be considerably more to own over the loss of an asset, and that translates to more cost for ratepayers. So one example of this might be putting a 15-year shingle on your roof when you could put a 25-year shingle, because we know the 25-year shingle is probably only going to last 15 years anyways. So these can generate a lot more cyclical costs. So a municipal office feasibility review would consider short and long-term costs to the ratepayers by analyzing first your upfront capital costs, which tends to be where the focus is, then the total cost of ownership over 25 years, and this includes things like operations and maintenance costs, energy costs, cyclical renewal costs, like the roof I mentioned, and salvage credit costs. And this would help ensure that the total investment over 25 years is considered before selecting the preferred option. So you would be in much better position to understand and appreciate what your costs are for a series of options. And we have seen similar reviews that have resulted in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in long-term savings when this is looked at. Consolidation of facilities has been shown to reduce overall costs and should be at least considered as one potential option. You have some neighbors in Renfrew County have done it. We have some in Lees and Grendel as well who've done it, and they've seen some good benefits from that. Okay, over to David.
Okay, the water and wastewater assets, including the plants, were built in the early 1970s. All are approaching 50 years in service. And the current cost to replace these assets are approximately $40 million. And it's conceivable that shortly after the asset management plan 20-year planning horizon, that the majority of these assets could reach the end of their expected life, and all at the same time. And this is a significant financial risk that we feel needs to be monitored. Planning for major capital replacement should begin immediately, including monitoring asset conditions as they continue to age. Leveraging the DC charges where possible to offset water and wastewater costs related to development is an important consideration. Increasing capital investments and contributions to reserves now to avoid the long-term impact of the water and wastewater system replacement costs should be a priority. The township undertook a road need study in 2019. The RNS also identified the need for preservative management in addition to capital reconstruction to keep good roads good. In addition, the road need study states the goal of preservative management is to extend the useful life of a road and road network, maximizing the township's investment over the road life cycle. We concur that preservative management is essential and should figure prominently in the asset management strategies going forward. So this is important because we do recognize that facilities and some other challenges on the asset management side are probably going to take the priority. So the preservative management piece is an important consideration. Our analysis has conducted that many of the critical preservative management programs are either underfunded or not funded at all. We have recommended a 10-year rolling road preservative management program. But the operations manager, we feel, should make recommendations to council as soon as possible on how the township should phase in a robust preservative management program. The township's landfill site reportedly had about 45 to 47 years of life expectancy. This allowed plenty of time to set aside funds towards future closure costs. In fact, the municipality was ahead of the schedule on that, as mentioned earlier. In early January, however, staff advised that as a result of the air reconnaissance, the life expectancy had dropped by over 75% of the former life expectancy and is now only 11 years. This is an enormous reduction, obviously, in life expectancy, and if accurate, would have a significant financial impact on the township. While recent increases in population and seasonal residents may have some impact on the change, it is unlikely that it had a major impact. One probable contributing factor is the very low construction dumping fees, which are referred to in Table 6A. Other facts such as diversion rates and compaction should be investigated, and also with the recycling switching over to the producers, that could potentially have an impact as well and should be considered. The township should have the findings of the latest analysis peer reviewed to ensure its accuracy, determine the cause, and develop courses of action to mitigate the impacts. Fees collected. Most of Madawaska Valley's fees are below its comparators. As noted, the landfill fees are quite low and may be contributing to the high volumes of capacity absorption. The township's water and wastewater fees and costs are considerably higher than the comparators. While user fees have been updated, they have not been studied to ensure cost recovery and comparable fees needed for a level playing field. As an example would be the dumping fees. When fees are not based on cost recovery, it falls to the taxpayers to fund the difference. User fees should pay for services that avail themselves, should be paid, users should all pay for the service that they avail themselves of, with the possible exception that often youth and senior programs, and particularly in recreation, are partially subsidized. This is particularly important when service levels differ across the township. We have recommended a user fee study that should include a consideration of the operation and capital cost, the hours of operation, the number of events, user information, municipal comparators, and council policy. The goal is to transfer as much cost as possible to the users of the services while still encouraging participation and affordability where applicable. We expect this will contribute to less burden on the ratepayers who are helping to offset these costs currently and are not near or at full cost recovery. Increased dumping fees and other township surcharges will help mitigate against consumption of the landfill capacity in addition to helping offset costs. A separate review should be conducted to ascertain why the water and wastewater fees and costs differ so significantly from your comparators.
Okay, and to procedural efficiencies. A sampling of the committee and council meetings sets the average length of meetings at almost 6 hours each. That is considerably longer than what we observe elsewhere by 3, even 4 hours per meeting. During those meetings, up to 9 or 10 staff attend or are on standby, which consumes their service delivery capacity. It's our opinion that meetings should, on average, be about 2 hours in length, but should never really exceed 3 hours. Conservatively, achieving a 3-hour meeting is estimated to generate an efficiency savings of in the order of about $6,000 per year, but we expect would be higher if meetings were closer to the 2-hour range. Lost staff and council opportunity time can be reallocated to other service delivery priorities. So there's a lot that can be gained here. So we have recommended a series of procedural changes to increase efficiencies and enhance outputs, but still ensure that business is accomplished. And these are included in Appendix 7 of our report, but here's some excerpts from it. So setting a limit for delegation presentation time, that's a pretty standard requirement. Include a recommendation or action for each item to be voted on by council. It needs to be clear that council is being asked to take a certain action and that needs to be in everything that comes before council. That will allow council to focus on what their objectives are. We believe the deputy clerk should introduce the items by reading the recommendation or action only. And we say this because the agenda is a public document. Everybody will have seen it. If they're there for a reason, they're there because they read a report. So we think that you can save time by doing it this way. And this is a pretty standard practice as well. The implementation of consent bulk agendas for reports, bylaws, resolutions, or other actions. So consent agendas are used effectively where in essence, if you had 5 bylaws on and they were fairly standard in nature, the mayor would ask if anyone wished to discuss any one of them or 2 of them. The ones that would be pulled off the consent agenda would be discussed. The others would be voted on in bulk and carried in bulk. Eliminate the regular variance reports in favor of comprehensive biannual financial reports. This doesn't mean variance reports aren't available to council. It just means that they don't necessarily need to be on the council agendas. Standardized staff reports with background analysis, consultations, options, policy considerations, and recommendations will allow everybody to focus on content. Eliminate any items that don't require a decision from council from the agendas. And you could utilize memos instead of council meetings to update council on these information type items. Remove other business and utilize notices of motion. So that makes sure that, when things appear on a council, that they're following a certain process and they don't just sort of appear. Set a curfew of 3 hours. And all procedural bylaws do have an opportunity to extend curfew. But what we're saying is if you plan for a 3-hour meeting, the likelihood of achieving it will be there. Utilize the advanced radar to plan for balanced agendas. This is a recommendation in our report. It's just a list of known upcoming legislative agenda items for council. Use it to plan your meetings. So with that, Madam Mayor and members of council, that is our report. We are happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Can we not share screens? Fantastic, because then I can see everybody.
All done.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Well done, gentlemen. This was a really interesting report to read. I didn't take it in any way negatively. I was excited. I was going from recommendation to recommendation going, yes, that would be great. And oh, I've always wanted to do that. And that's a really interesting idea. So I really appreciate the work you've put into it. Just 1 second. Sorry, I was at the Roma conference and there was a lot of talking. I'm losing my voice. Anyways, I really do appreciate all the work you've put into it. And I think there's all kinds of great opportunities that you've presented. Having read the report in detail over a week ago, I have to go back and look at it again, but I know I was very excited to get it and to be reading it and seeing the potential for the future of this municipality. I do feel we have come a long way in the last 8 or 10 years as we've progressed to the point that you are now looking at us in detail, and I'm hoping we can continue on that path forward that's going to get us to some excellent services at very good costs and the efficiencies that we're hoping to find. Wow. So I'm going to start by let's go with council first. I wanted to see, does anyone have any questions? Was there anything you wanted to comment on the report? Anything you want to ask? Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you, Chair. Your last item here, which is described in specifically on your pages 56, 57, 58 on the length of meetings, I can't agree more. This bulk consent agenda is a great idea. I think it's very efficient. I love what you guys have done here. Your whole report is just brilliant. It addresses every problem we've had, I think. And I would concur that should be a very big priority to try and get this installed into our procedural bylaws so we can work more efficiently, save money. And I think it answers all the questions for the public too. As you mentioned, it's available online. If anybody's got any comments to make, they know what's available under each resolution. And that would basically answer the problem. Instead of reading everything out all the time, it would cut to the chase, so to speak. So thank you very much, gentlemen. That was wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilmer.
Thank you. Yeah, I too think it's an excellent report. What I'd like to say, I really didn't find any surprises in it, but I am glad to see that we're doing well in many, many areas. And I really appreciate the comments and the way they were written in the report, because I think it provides us with a great deal of information moving forward. I think your recommendations are all excellent, and I don't think there's anything I disagree with in the report at all. So, to me, it's going to be a very useful tool for us over the next number of years moving forward. And I think it gives us a tremendous starting point of how to get through some of the problems we are experiencing right now. And when I say problems, I think we're generally in good shape, but like every municipality, we do have some areas we need to work on. One question though that I did have, and that was on the library, and I noticed there is no mention of it other than I think a little bit on the age of the library and the condition, but just wondering if you did have an opportunity to interview or talk to staff there, and is there a reason we don't talk about the library?
Yeah, I'm going to let David go into more detail, but I'll sort of give a high level. There's a lot of more good things we could be saying about the township, but the sheer volume of the report itself was getting pretty big. So we try to hit on what we can. There's a lot of things we do in the background, and I think I mentioned this when the tables were up, that we look at the data. And there is, David did the research on the library. He had discussions with the CEO, and
Can you hear me?
careful about when we're asking questions of council. Okay. Are we okay here?
You're back. You were
Okay,
on
sorry.
pause.
Okay, we try not to ask leading questions. So we don't want to put someone in the position of saying, well, I think I know what you want us to say, so I'll say it. So when we ask questions, we start, very high, and we with a broad circle, and start to work our way down to drill down. We didn't hear very big concerns with the library at all. The research we did concluded that it was pretty typical of a library. Things are in good shape, but I'll let David take it from there. And if you do want to see some of the analysis we've done, I've got a table that I can put up for you, Councillor Weller.
Yep. Yeah, just expanding on what Michael said, I had an excellent interview with the chief librarian, got into some detail, and I was candid. We got to be careful of jurisdiction a little bit. We are doing a review of the municipality, and we want to respect the autonomy of the library board. So we are very candid, and we do look at certain aspects of the library, but we don't get into the details of the operations and the services that they provide. So we look at hours of operation as an example. We look at the grants that are being provided by the municipality. We look at the wages and salaries, and we look at circulation numbers and the number of households that are being served. We look at that analysis to determine if there's any concerns. Quite honestly, you're quite very average in terms of where you are in terms of comparators. We had no concerns in any of those aspects. That's why they were not raised. The only real thing that which we agreed with was the facility itself. It has provided good service in the past, but we feel that there's a need for modernization of the library services or library building going forward. Libraries are transitioning, as you know, where they were primary an institution for the lending of books. That has changed significantly over the past years, where they're more cultural, more programming, and that is where I think the facility is lacking in terms of being able to provide that kind of support. So, and that's why we suggested that it be part of the analysis for the municipal offices. It's one option that should be considered. There's many options that should be considered, but I think that is one option. So honestly, the library is in good shape. I think it's providing great value. It never was raised as a concern by anybody in terms of the value it was giving. So hence it didn't take up a lot of room in the report, and so that's why.
Councillor Wilmer.
Yeah, thank you. And both of you answered it very well. And that's sort of what I was hoping to hear, because I think that's what I expected. And I guess if there's really nothing outstanding to be seen going on, then there's no need to comment on it in the report. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Schulist.
Yeah, to you, Madam Mayor. That's exactly what we wanted from this review and report. I think we can learn from this. Of course, we can see maybe some of our weakness. Not that we have that many, but we do want to do better in the future. And that what I found interesting is, and I'm glad this came in the report was the Muskoka Effect. Our community has been hearing this. We are the next Muskoka, and I know that one of our pressures is growth and how we handle this growth, right? So, and a lot of that stuff could be, the problem that we have with the landfill, like you were saying in the report. It's not all of it, but we really do have to look at maybe some of their shortfalls where we don't want to make some mistakes that they have made. We want to make sure that if we're going to be compared to them, we want to make sure that we make the right decision on any growth that we have here, because sometimes it can go in the wrong direction. But growth is always good, but there's also maybe a downfall at times. So we do have to be very, very careful. So I appreciate that being in the report. Overall, I loved it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schulis. Councillor Poplinski. Oh, and you're on mute, sorry.
There we go. How are we doing now?
You're great.
Thank you, Mayor Love. And gentlemen, I think it's a wonderful report and long overdue. Very, very focused. And I have to thank David for his patience in dealing with me on 2 occasions. And David, I appreciated the time and valued the conversation we had. And it's so nice to see that it certainly, it's all encompassing on the many issues that are not just our township, but many of the other townships face. And you've got 60 some recommendations, and I do agree that the 3 priorities are ones which needs to be dealt with. And I was just wondering, with the priorities, of course, the procedural efficiencies, would that anyway include looking at our overall chart, our organizational chart, with the various jobs specified, wage grid, allocation of duties to employees, and would that be considered? I would think it would be, and I'm just wondering if you could just clarify that for me.
So there are certainly a few added duties that we have recommended be moved around, shifted about. Your deputy clerk, for example, we've pointed some issues there, health and safety, some of the functions that the planner is doing, whatnot. So there is an obligation under the Pay Equity Act to do maintenance. And maintenance means that if jobs do change over time, and that's expected, they do happen, that they need to be reviewed on a regular basis. It doesn't mean you do them at the drop of a hat, but you might have an annual review where you have a screening process, and if duties have changed, you look at that. You are obliged to do that anyways. Your CAO is quite aware of that as well. We've had some discussion about that. So in answer to your question, job descriptions will need to be updated if duties do change, no question. And frankly, they should be updated when duties change, because should that position become vacated suddenly without sort of any knowledge that it was coming, you're going to want to get going on replacing it, that position, as quickly as you can for business continuity purposes too. So it's very important to make sure that all your job descriptions stay current and are up to date. We didn't see any structural changes at this point. You've undergone a fairly recent review that way, so we didn't envisage any organizational design changes at this point. You may decide after a while of, and this is common too, you've had this organizational design for a short period of time. You may decide on your own in a year or so, especially after looking at some of the service delivery priorities, you may decide that there's a tweak here or a tweak there. That's very common as well. So I would say never remain static. Always keep a look at things, monitor them, see how it's working for you, note where it isn't working out well, and identify where those avenues to improve are. So I would say on an annual basis, you should be up from the beginning.
Okay, did we lose you?
Well,
Michael,
I'm
are you there?
here. I'm here, but
Yeah.
it sounds like maybe I'm not.
Okay, your internet keeps sort of stalling.
Okay.
Could you possibly repeat just the very last couple of, I know,
Sure.
sorry to ask, the last
No
couple of
problem.
sentences, just the last bit.
Yeah, so it's important to always look at job descriptions and how well the organization is running. And if there are tweaks that can happen to the organization that would help, that's good. The fact that you've got a new organizational design, I would say you do need to give it some time and see how these new duties, these new functions that we've suggested you look at, play out. And then I do agree that you should always monitor these to make sure that they're current and accurate and are in the best shape they can be for service delivery purposes. But at this point, I don't see any structural changes yet. I think you need to let this unfold a little bit, let your new structure unfold, and maybe have a look at it in a year or so and see how things are going.
Okay, Councillor Poplinski, did you get the full answer?
Yeah, I did. And actually, it's very reassuring, and thank you so much. I think that we have a lot to work with, and it's one thing to spend time and money on a report, but it's only good if we act upon it. And I think that is really the focus at this point. And thank you for your time and spent on this. I think, as I said earlier, it was something that should have happened probably long ago, but nevertheless, it's done now and it's our responsibility to deal with. So thank you again, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Gentlemen, I did want to ask you something since I've gone through council. I'm not seeing any other questions from them. I did want to ask you about how you formalize succession strategies, because I do know that the CAO has spoken in the performance appraisal process and also our I'm going to start calling them our senior leadership team. I really want them to think that way, our department heads. That they do performance appraisals and they talk with each of their employees about succession planning and what their interests are. But how do you formalize succession planning?
That's a good question. One of the things that is very helpful is developing a succession policy. And there are two levels to that in my view. The one is the policy framework, what we will do as an organization. And it would be things like we may have a mentoring program for entry staff. We may do exit programs even too, but we may have certain training modules for key staff at all times. Special projects will be considered where there's an interest in it. So there's a whole bunch of these sort of policy framework type things. In my mind, there's about a dozen of them, and I'd be happy to share them with your staff later. And then there's the actual annual review process, where you're sitting down with someone and you're having a two-way conversation. Gone are the days where the supervisor says, here's what you got to do for the next year, go do it. It should be more of a two-way iterative process where goals are set through collaboration. And I don't necessarily ascribe to just an annual review. You need the formal annual review, but there should be a couple of touch points throughout the year. There should be this open door policy for each staff member to be able to just knock on the manager's door and say, I may be slipping or I might need this. So I can certainly provide some insight on that, but I think you start with the policy. The policy will inform your annual review process.
Okay, that would be great. I think it would be very helpful if you have some examples, because I think it's something I thought as a member of council that we were actually doing, but I didn't know when I read the bit about formalizing it, what that meant and what that looked like. And so basically there's more we could put into that. And I know as a council, we've always supported training for staff and upgrading their skills and training. The challenge, obviously, with succession planning is that you can never truly guarantee someone will move from this position to that position. There's always a process when you go to hire that involves a competitive component to it. You are looking, if you can, internally to consider someone who wants to move up, but you do have to have a competitive process. So that was why I wasn't sure how that
Right.
would be accomplished.
I would also suggest, I mean, might be having problems with my internet again. I'm seeing it's unstable, but Secession obviously implicitly, because of the titles, is moving up the ranks, but also having really skilled employees who don't really care about moving up the ranks is part of that succession strategy, where they can pick up the slack when there's a surge in work in one unit, or maybe a departure of another employee. And I know your CAO is working on some strategies there. So there's always the moving up the ladder piece to succession, but there's also the corporate readiness, the corporate memory transfer, and all those other things that just make service delivery all that much more robust. So yes, I'd be happy to share that with your team.
Okay, so I think as a council, when we think of that, we talk about cross-training.
Yes.
But what you've talked about is a little bit broader than that.
Yes.
So no,
Yes.
I get you.
Yeah, more than just knowing what your neighbor down the hall is doing. It's having those special experiences that help inform you about the organization, and there's plenty of opportunities. You've got a lot on your plate, and actually this may be a great leaping off opportunity for certain staff to try new things and gain better experience.
Great, thank you. Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Love. That was a very good question you had, and I think that I think we understand the concept of succession planning and the need for it, and cross-training and so on as being one of the aspects of it. But just wondering if you could talk on the challenges that we have as a small organization compared to someone that's got 1,000 or 2,000 employees that have always got somebody waiting in the wings and being trained to take over many key positions. How do we approach that? That's always been my thinking, and it limited resources, and we can't have paying two people to do one job, but at the same time we need people that are qualified. And I'm just wondering if you could share some of your thoughts on that.
Yes, that's a really good point, and it's we do a lot of work for what I'll describe as the smaller municipalities, sort of the 10,000 or under group. We also have done municipalities of 1 million, but in the smaller environments, as you say, you have, usually one planner, you have one chief building official, although right now you have help in that area because it makes sense to do it. But often you just don't have that second employee, and often these are special positions that you don't necessarily have the ability to lend to another department or what have you. So one of the things that we are strong on is the senior management meeting, and the mayor mentioned it, because it is a knowledge transfer vehicle. It is an ability to not just say, hey, did you hear what Public Works is doing? That's the venue for Public Works and perhaps the fire department to talk about how something on a hydrant might be affecting both of them, and just sharing knowledge. So sharing knowledge at the senior management level is important. Opportunities for staff to, at the very least, understand the basics about a job. When somebody comes to the front counter, for example, and needs help, they can at least field the question. So as an example, often a chief building official will have some experience in zoning matters and could maybe just help with, if the planner's tied up, with fielding some zoning matter questions. So you have to find those positions within the organization that make the most sense, and they're not always the same. You need to share a lot of information. You need to have a lot more dialogue at the senior level, but also at the team level. And I really do like your Monday morning format that your CAO does. I think that's helpful. It's a combination of many things. Training, I would say, formal training is probably lower on that list. It's the practical training that is more helpful. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be able to do the chief building official's job, but they can maybe take in an application, ensure that it gets vetted through the right process in the organization, and at least the steps are followed. So that's sharing information is key. Mentorship is key, and cross training is important as well.
Okay, I just wanted to, maybe if I could just add a little bit to that, if you don't mind. It's just the relationship between succession planning and master planning. I understand you're in a small municipality. You do not often have that person coming up to take over that role, just because you might only have one person total in that department or in that position. But the master planning is a very important piece of succession planning, where you summarize the corporate knowledge of that department, what the issues are, where you're going in terms of your planning going forward. So when it comes time to have a new lead in that department, where you were and where you're going is already summarized. So that's a very important piece of the succession planning process, and why we put so much emphasis on strategic planning, and why we feel it's a good investment to spend the money. Often we hear, well, that's that plan is $50,000. That's a lot of money for a small municipality, and it is, but it plays such a key piece in the succession planning that we feel it's a good investment.
Also helpful for new counselors too. If should a new counselor come on board and the master plan is there, it's a great guide to where the organization is and where it plans to head to go.
Thank you kindly, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Poplinski. So maybe I'm going to dig into that a little bit, because I've, having been on council now 7 years, I honestly don't know what a master plan is. So I'm going to just ask you to describe to me, who would normally make a master plan? Is it something you contract out? Is it something that's done by your department head? And generally, what would I expect to find in it? And how does that differ from a work plan?
Right. So another great question. The work plan comes after the master plan. It's how you operationalize some of the elements of the master plan. So here's a couple of master plans you might find. You might find a fire master plan. So it would be 20 years of where the organization needs to go, whether it's equipment, whether it's vehicles, whether it's expansion of the facility, whether it's training needs. All those things get identified. And it also factors in things like, how does growth impact us? So you're matching growth with you're sort of pacing, you're lockstep with growth. And then it will identify at a high level what year it is forecast to come into. That can then inform your budgets, your development charges, your long range capital forecasts, how you contribute to your reserves, and a whole host of other things. If you were looking at, say, water and sewer, it would do similar sorts of things. It would say, here's our system. We think we're going to have growth pressures over here. Here's what we need to do to get there. Here's what's involved in getting there. And here's how we would manage and finance that so that it's just on time. In other words, you're not building something that's not needed. It arrives when the need is there. And then what happens is that then is like sort of the baton gets handed over to staff at budget time and long range capital forecast time to then say, okay, it's this year. This is the year. This is the year we're extending that water main. Everybody knows about it. Council's seen it in the long range capital forecast for the last 3 or 4 years. Money's been set aside. There's reserve money. There's development charge money. It's time to go and throw that into the capital budget. Make sure council wants to pull that final trigger, and then it goes into the annual work plan, and the operations manager is responsible for getting that done this year. So it takes the plan and turns it into an operational output at the end. And this can be for anything. It can be for recreation. It can be for fire. It can be for servicing. It can be for drainage. And it's very much like a strategic plan, but more with your assets.
Okay, Michael, so can I just kind of just ask then, should we pick somewhere to start? Because obviously we're going to have to find some expertise to create a master plan. Right. We probably don't have all the expertise in-house to do that. So we might be looking at, I noticed you recommended water and wastewater master plan, and that's tied significantly with growth that we're anticipating seeing in and around our settlement area. Fire master plan. What was some of the other ones? There were a few of them. Recreation. Yes, recreation. Absolutely. So obviously a council can't commission 5 or 6 master plans in 1 year without
No.
it hugely impacting
Mhm.
our staff's ability to stay sane, because there's going to be a lot of interaction in producing those plans with our staff, but also the financial impact. Where would you suggest we start? Have you, I can't remember, honestly, I freely admit I don't remember. Was there one particular master plan you think this council should start with?
Well, yeah, certainly the absence of a master servicing plan is a concern to me, because how do you know how much it's going to cost to do something? How do you know when you need to do something? How do you know how you're going to coordinate it? So certainly, if growth pressure continues, although there's capacity at the plant, that's one thing. Getting there is a whole different story. Do you need a pump station? Do you need a lift station? Do you, force main or what have you? And there's a bit of that out there from what I understand. So I would not take on more than one master plan a year. A master plan generally takes about a year to do, from inception to getting it through to council, because you want to go back occasionally with council and say, here's where we landed on the first part of our review. Are we hitting it right, council? You get the nod from council, you move to the next stage. You come back and you say, here's where 4 or 5 options, we're getting ready to finalize. Really, and some of them do follow the EA process, like a master servicing one, which there are some legislated steps. Others not so much. Others such as a recreation master plan, which we did not recommend, but we would not tell you it's a bad idea to do. I would say with an organization like yours, 1 a year is the most I would recommend doing. It's just, they're a lot of work. They involve a lot of players. They involve a lot of council time. Your treasurer, I guarantee you, is going to be in there on just about every one of them, because if you can't pay for something, then there's no point in trying to study it, right? So, and there will be key players that will be leaders in some, but maybe support in another. And for example, I would see that the operations manager would lead the servicing ones, but fire would be a support, because fire might be expressing their concerns about fire flows, hydrant locations, and things like that. In an organization your size, that's going to absorb a lot of your people. 1 a year at the most. A lot of them are eligible for grants, which is a good thing. So I would suggest, you get them written up, drafted up, like your proposals, so that they're close to ready to go, and then you can just fine tune them before you go. But I would start probably with the servicing. And the other one that I think is important, it's not quite a master plan, but I think it's critical to your operations, is your feasibility review. That's not a master plan by any stretch, but it's key to your whole organization and how you're set up. And, you've got so many shortfalls there right now. You've outgrown things. You're continuing to grow. It's an important one. David, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the feasibility review is obviously one. Another one, it's not really a master plan, as well as the zoning bylaw, the comprehensive zoning bylaw. We feel that that's something that really is important, especially with Madawaska Valley experiencing the growth that they're doing now, to be able to manage that growth a little bit better. And updating that zoning bylaw will hopefully take away some of the workload in terms of minor variances and zoning changes, those types of things that, because the zoning bylaw is not up to date, maybe more of them coming through than maybe necessary. I just want to point out too, we often say, well, what's council's role? And it's not council's role to get involved in the daily operations of the municipality. And I think we all agree with that. But it's the master plans is where council can insert themselves into the discussion and become part of the process in the more appropriate way, in terms of where they want the municipality to go, in terms of what services they're providing and how they're going to be provided. So it's a really important piece for council to be part of that process. And then that gives them some comfort level, and it sort of takes away the need to get into the nitty-gritty of the daily operations when those plans are done. The second thing is, it's a perfect opportunity to engage residents and ratepayers in the process. so that they are part of the process. So a recreation master plan is an example. What really do you want to offer in terms of recreation? What do you want to offer in terms of library services? What do you want to offer in terms of other cultural possibilities and tourism, economic development? These are the times when you can engage the public and find out truly where they want to go. So they have so many good things. They're not cheap. And I think often it's important to bring in a outside perspective, whether it's a consultant or somebody that brings in that outside perspective. And then between the outside perspective and your own knowledge and what the ratepayers want to do is all forms what the final document may look like.
Just one point to what David said. Our report actually says kill two birds with one stone and do your zoning and your master servicing at the same time, because they're so intertwined in terms of how they sort of correlate with one another. That's master planning at its best, because you're taking two master plans and coordinating them at the same time. And so we if you're going to do one master plan, it would be those two together as a sort of a large one. And there would be some sequencing to that, of course, but they should be done together. And I agree with everything else David has said as well.
Okay, so just council isn't aware of this, and I will come to you, Councillor Schulist, but the County of Renfrew is doing our update of our comprehensive zoning bylaw, and they have placed us in year 2, despite my urging that we wanted to be in year 1. So this council would be looking, well, it'd be the next council at 2023 for the update of the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So if we were to recommend to the next council that servicing plan be done at the same time, perhaps that would free us up for 2022 to look at the possibility of doing the feasibility study. Because knowing what we're doing with our municipal office would be huge. It's obviously a massive constraint to our staff in how they work, and to how, at the moment we don't need that council chamber, we're on Zoom, but at some point we are hoping that COVID will end and we can get back into the council chamber. So perhaps council, we give some consideration to the idea, based on what David and Michael have said, that we look at the feasibility study to ensure that we know that we're making the right decisions as it relates to our facility, our municipal facility, and our library, and any other possibilities around that. Does that sound, we are constrained by what the County of Renfrew is going to do for us. So does that sound like a possible way we could discuss approaching them? I'm sticking you guys right on the spot. Who wants to, Michael or David, do you think if we were to tackle it that way, to do feasibility this year and look at the combined thing next year?
From the feasibility, sorry, Michael, from the feasibility perspective, I think you're kind of at a crossroads now. You can't really start investing in those facilities until you know where you're going. So I think there is some urgency there. And then I think, and Michael probably is going to speak to the coordination of the zoning bylaw and the servicing master plan. But there's certainly urgency to the feasibility study for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with what David said, and I would add that this is a council decision, of course. Do you feel that you want to do them together, but still have the county doing the zoning bylaw, or do you want to try to acquire a consultant that can do both? So you have a planner and an engineer working together on that. Now, the benefit of that, I will say, is that you tend to get more generic zoning bylaws from a senior level of government, because they use a sort of a standard approach. So maybe not a Madawaska-centric type of approach. Whereas if you've retained a consultant, that consultant is you are that consultant's employer. You are telling them the important things to be considered. There is I'm not saying that the county won't do a good job. What I'm saying is you may get more Madawaska specific by having a consultant do it at the same time, and even the same firm or in partnership with the same firm that's doing your master servicing study.
Okay, I actually honestly didn't realize that it was something that we could consider other options other than the county of Renfrew. I am a planning ignoramus.
Yeah. No, there are plenty of firms out there that have, the teams that would come in and be able to do that for you.
Okay, well, that gives us certainly as a council something we can discuss, because, if I'm hearing some consensus from council that they really like what they've seen, and we don't want to put this on a shelf. We want to, begin the process of getting some of this work done. And the most exciting thing about this plan is to me, it's a legacy document. It's the document we're going to hand the next council. And it's been thoroughly looked into and researched, and your recommendations are excellent. So it's a great thing to be handing off to the next council. I'm very proud of it, to be able to do that, and that we've done all this great work, and there's all this potential for the future. Anything further from council? Any other questions? Anything else you wanted to delve into? This is our opportunity. Oh yes, sorry, Councillor Schulist.
No problem, Madam Mayor. I'm going to direct this one to Mr. Reid. I know that you were mayor of Arm prior, and you know the county quite well. And was there any other municipality within Renfrew County that has taken the steps of doing a master plan and stuff like that? So, sometimes you can learn from others of how, their process was. And so is there anybody?
David, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Your turn.
All right. Sorry about that. Absolutely. I think a lot of the municipalities within Renfrew County have done some forms of master planning. Michael would probably know more than me on this, because a lot of cases, municipalities reach out to neighboring municipalities for master planning. I know Arn Prior, as an example, has done master plans pretty well in all departments. And I would say, would hazard to guess that most of the larger municipalities have done likewise. But you do see it more and more in the smaller municipalities as well, especially in areas where you're pivoting a little bit and where you want to go. You're uncertain where you want to go in terms of services. You may want to, if you're having challenges in one department in terms of issues, you may want to look at them in that aspect too. But even with Madawaska Valley, the size of Madawaska Valley, we see value in them. And we understand that you cannot do them all at once, but if you put them on a cycle, like a 5-year cycle as an example, where each one is visited every 5 years, that would be something that would be manageable, both in terms of staff resources and financial resources. But there's lots of examples of financial or master plans out there. We'd be happy to show you a number of ones that probably would be similar to Madawaska Valley. There's lots of good examples out there. Michael?
Well, listen, thank you very much, Mr. Reid. That's very good. Yeah, I think we need to be, sort of proactive on this, and if it's going to help our municipality, we should really be looking into it. So thank you very much.
David, if you could provide us with some of those examples, it might give council a better understanding of the value of the master plan, to be able to read a few of them and just see what other municipalities have done. That would be great. Okay.
Yeah, and the good thing is that most of those master plans are available online. So a little bit of research, we can certainly give you a few examples.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from council at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Is there any members of staff? We got a fair number of our staff here. Does anybody want to ask anything or comment on anything? Mr. Larbetsky.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one comment or correction to the report on page 244. It indicates that the zoning amendment application fee is $750. That is incorrect. It is $1,500. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, is, David, is that because there's a mix of the fee in that?
Yes, and that maybe should have been clarified. There's a county portion in there as well. I think I only showed the Madawaska Valley portion in the fee, so that possibly should have been clarified. But there's I think a $750 component both for the Madawaska Valley and $750 for the county, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right, we will note that.
By the way, that actually is noted at note 4 on page 244.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's in there.
Yep.
It's good to have that clarity. Any other members of staff? Any comments? How about the CAO? There we go. Sorry, Sue. I can see you, and I actually, therefore, I'm not looking at you. I don't know why that is. Go
No,
ahead.
That's fine. Thank you. Yes, thanks through the chair. I just wanted to remind council that the grant funding that was leveraged to offset the costs of this review was definitely worth the application. I think the benefits and how this report will prepare us and provide us more leverage when we're trying to get more funds for different reviews will assist us in the future as well. I do want to thank Michael and David on behalf of all of the staff for their engagement and for being so accommodating with everyone's schedule. But I think what I appreciated the most was it was refreshing to see that this was not a high level review. It involved council, all department heads, the library staff, public works staff, office staff, because oftentimes we don't have the boots on the ground aspect in the review, and this certainly gives us that. So I do appreciate that. So the next steps for council's information for staff is that we do plan on going through all Appendix 2, the 66 recommendations, and responding accordingly to each of them as they're prioritized and timelines, and have staff bring that prior to the budget deliberations. But personally, thank you both for the, and I know that you had to rush through the report in order for us to meet our funding timelines as well. And that was very much appreciated. And we will, after we do our review of the recommendations, I will be reaching out, Michael and David, just to see if staff has any questions as to where we can leverage more information and or acquire different training and or different options available to us. So I thank you both, and thank you for council to allow us to put this proposal forward, and for staff member that I believe was the treasurer applied for the funding to under modernization to do this. And I think already, even reading through the recommendations, it was really nice to see that I saw a lot of correlation with what we've already identified in our strategic plan. So I think what I'm seeing is this council having been very proactive in the last few years with the asset management plan, the roads needs study, the water wastewater rate study that was done, the development charges moving forward. I think that you're giving us you're bringing us back to where staff wants to be, which is not reports on the shelf, but all reports that work towards the master plan. So thank you for that. And council, you should be congratulated for being very proactive in allowing us to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And I certainly appreciate the intense work that went into this to get it done on the schedule that we had for the grant to complete for the grant application. And none of it is rushed. I think you guys just didn't sleep because the recommendations clearly show to me that you have a deep understanding of our municipality and of our services and how we are functioning at this point in time. And that's you know, I don't know. Like I said, when I was reading it, I was just going, yes, oh, wow. Hey, they put this in here. I wasn't expecting that. That's fantastic. Oh, I've always wanted to do that. So, you know, to me, there's nothing about this report that I felt was negative. I mean, I do like that you have taken such a positive approach, but I didn't feel anything was negative, because they're all areas that we all know as a council. These are things we somehow wanted to make better, but weren't always sure how to make it work. And I think that's what you've provided us with is the recommendations provide us with an opportunity and a path that we can look to make it work. So thank you so much. You know, I can't say enough about how great and how excited I am about this report, and just how thrilled and proud I am to be able to hand it to the next council. You know?
Well, we very much appreciated working with council, your staff, and all the extended people that we consulted with as part of this, and it was thoroughly enjoyable. And as I've said to your CAO, the relationship doesn't end today. If there's any follow-up, any questions, anything you need, we're a phone call or an email away.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And David, I loved working with you.
Okay.
Geez, it's nice to talk to somebody who's been a mayor.
Well, it was a pleasure as well. And obviously all of council, very experienced, have a lot of knowledge, probably the most experienced council that I've dealt with in these reviews. So in good hands, and I think everyone genuinely wants to make the municipality better, and looks at these reviews as a positive thing rather than negative, you know, criticism. So it was really a pleasure to work with everybody, and glad that you're pleased with the result.
Councillor Wilmer.
Just looking at my watch, and I think today we might meet one of your recommendations. So we're learning.
Yeah. Yes, and that would be lovely. Okay, is there anything further for Michael or David? I think we've expressed ourselves fairly clearly, and we've got a lot of exciting work ahead of us. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for coming and presenting it. And thank you for all the work.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Okay, so where am I at here? So Sue, basically we are accepting this report as, we're adopting it as under a bylaw. I assume that's one of the requirements for the grant.
That is correct.
Okay. So looking at the agenda, bylaws is next. So we have bylaw 2022-04 regarding adoption of the report from Municipal Government Wayfinders with respect to the Township of Madawaska Valley Operational Service Review. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-04, being a bylaw to adopt the Township of Madawaska Valley Operational Service Delivery Review prepared by Municipal Government Wayfinders, is given first and second reading this 27th day of January 2022. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Is there any discussion on the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-04 be given third and final reading this 27th day of January 2022. Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any final discussion on the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. All right, we have no other business today, so we will go to our confirming bylaw, bylaw 2022-05. It's the confirming bylaw for the special council meeting of January 27th, 2022. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-05, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley at a council meeting of January 27th, 2022, be given first and second reading. Moved by, who wants to move it? Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Bromwich. All those in favor? And that's carried. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-05 be given third and final reading this 27th day of January 2022. Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Schulist. All those in favor? And that's carried. A motion to adjourn, gentlemen. Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Schulist. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everyone. We are